It's back to more of the Business Edge on V1370.
Welcome back, everyone. This week we are talking about pricing strategies so that you can make sure that you are charging what your product or service is worth. So just a quick recap. We had talked before the break about cost-based pricing, where you figure out how much does it cost you to deliver your product or service, and then tack onto that amount how much profit you want to make. Then we started talking about market-based. And market-based, again, is another really simple way of figuring out what you should be charging for your services. Because you can do the research. Every year around tax time, I get my employees on the phone calling other tax preparers and the big chain tax preparing companies and find out what they're charging. Mainly just for my own information, because I've already determined what I should be charging for my services, for my firm's services. But it's good to know what's going on out there in the market. So again, it's easy to research. Takes some time, but it's easy to research. But here's a big challenge, and I'll use my own industry as an example with accounting work. For tax returns, you can find prices, people charging anywhere from $50 for a rather complex tax return because they're doing it in their basement on the weekends and evenings during tax time. They have a full-time day job, and they're just doing this to make some extra money. All the way to the other extreme is you have one of the big four accounting firms that they're not even going to talk to you without charging you at least several $1,000s for the simplest of tax returns. So how do you deal with that? How do you determine where your pricing should lie? And that is where, you look at, as Kia and Lexus has done, you look at where in the market do you want to be and decide what is your target market. Who is your client that you want to serve? And then what fee structure would they be most okay? Let's see. We got a call from Dan from Kearney. Dan, what is your question?
Hi, good morning. How you doing?
Okay. How are you, Dan?
All right. Listen, the question I have is, I came in late in the show. I'm just starting a business. I'm starting up a small music studio. I've recently retired. And I give basically piano, guitar lessons, and sell musical supplies and that kind of a thing. I'm trying to get it started up, and I'm having a dickens of a time pricing the teaching, pricing the lessons. And what's really given me a hard time is all of the startup costs that I never really kind of thought they would be quite what they are as far as the studio, and try to create a website. I've done some direct marketing, and I guess my question to you is, in pricing what I'm worth, and there's a tremendous range in what my competition, if you will, is charging for their services and supplies. Not so much on the supply side, but on the service side, there's a great range. I'm just wondering, kind of what direction I should take, given I've had all these startup costs. I'm concerned I'm going to be pricing myself out of the market, and my market is basically Hartford, Baltimore County. So any advice you could give me? I guess I'm wondering, do I just kind of eat the startup costs and just sort of hope that, as the business grows, I'll be able to recover them, or just any advice would be very helpful. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Excellent question, Dan, because what you bring up is a very key distinction in how you look at your pricing strategy and the overall profit of your business. Is the first step is, one, what are your revenues? And then from your revenues, you need to minus out what is the cost of actually producing those revenues. And when you do that, you get what's called and I'm going to, unfortunately, I got to use some accounting terminology here, but I don't know what else to call it, is your gross profit. Okay, this is your profit before you cover any of your startup costs, your basic overhead, any other costs that are not directly involved in providing your service. So, Dan, in your case, the studio time where you need to rent to give these lessons, that is a cost for providing your service. Whereas your website is a cost that is not directly related to providing your service. It is something that you need to invest in your business to even get clients or customers to start with. So where the studio time is a cost you figure into the price of your service, the website is the cost is what you need to pay for out of the profit of delivering your service. So, for example, let's say, and I have no idea what music lessons cost, but let's say you charge $100 an hour. And the time, what it actually costs you is, I don't know, $25 an hour for the studio. So maybe you're making $75 an hour. Okay. There may be some other costs involved in directly teaching the student. But then out of that $75 you have left over, that's where you pay for the investment in your business, the startup costs and other costs like your website. And then you're going to have ongoing website maintenance, office supplies, other advertising you might do. So a very important piece of pricing what you're worth is not just, and I was kind of leading up to this with the various pricing strategies, you need to make sure that the profit you have tacked onto your price of your product or service after you figure out the direct cost of delivering that service is then enough to cover all those other costs that are not involved in delivering your service. And then
that's the problem. That's the problem I'm having right now.
Yeah.
And that after I take all of those startup costs off of my what you refer to as the profit, there's no profit. And in fact, I'm kind of running in the hole here, and I'm wondering if I've bit off more than I can chew. I am a little bit nervous about continuing, quite honestly, but it's really something I love to do, and kind of a dream, something I always really kind of had in mind to do. But I guess the devil's in the details.
Yeah, it certainly is. The devil is in the details. Now, you say you just started working on this business?
This year.
2007.
Okay. Uh-huh.
All right. Well, the first thing to understand about when you're just starting a business is that for any business, there are a lot of startup costs involved. And it may take you several years to recoup those startup costs. So those initial costs you're going to have to spread out over time. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that is common for you're not doing anything wrong, Dan. That is common for every new business, is that there are a lot of costs, a lot of things you got to pay for up front before you ever get your first client.
So you think I would just hang in there, huh?
Well, yes, because on average, it takes most small businesses at least 3 years to start showing a profit. Okay. At least 3 years. And
Let me ask you, can I ask you one other question?
Sure,
and then,
sure.
And then I'll let you go. I'm sorry I'm taking up
That's
so much
okay.
time. But the other question I have is that the market that I'm in, which, as I said, is sort of Baltimore, Harford County. Well, as you know, there are various economic levels represented in those communities. Mm-hmm. And in terms of a pricing strategy, I mean, I'm wondering, because this is really an issue for how I advertise myself, like on the website and so forth. I'm wondering whether or not I'm wondering who I should be marketing to. I'm afraid if I go kind of on the high end and in kind of in an effort to recover some of my startup costs, I might be pricing myself right out of the market. On the other hand, if I go too low, I'm wondering if I'm going to be perceived as not good enough for some of the higher socioeconomic neighborhoods, if you know what I mean. So maybe you could just address that. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. That is a very good question, too, and it's about figuring out where you want to place yourself in the market and who is the market you want to deal with. Because you're right, you could charge very little and you could charge a lot. And if you try, and this is a challenge that a lot of small business owners have is what I feel is a lot of my clients, I have to encourage them to increase what they charge for their services, and not necessarily because they're not making a profit, and oftentimes they're not because they're not charging enough, but because they give the impression that they're not worth it. Now, if you came to me as a CPA and I was going to take care of your bookkeeping, your tax returns, give you all the financial advice you need all year long for only $100, what would you think? First, I would hope you would think I was a total idiot if I was charging that little. There is a perception in our marketplace, in our society, that if you're charging really cheap, you're cheap. And that therefore you're not worth it. And we do, as Americans, we do tend to assess a perceived value to a particular product or service based on what we're paying for it. And that comes back to that Kia versus a Lexus. And I'm surprised I haven't gotten any car people telling me, here's what the real difference is between those two cars. But the bottom line is Lexus has decided they're going after the higher end market. Okay, certainly not the Ferrari market, but they're going after a higher end market. Kia has decided they're going after a different market, okay, and more of a middle market. And that is what you need to decide, Dan, and anyone else trying to decide, because pricing is where you really choose that market. Now, how do you know what your market is going to pay? You need to do the research. The Pratt Library downtown has a business library section where the librarians there can help you find the market research to determine your target market. What are they willing to pay? So in Dan's case, if he wants to help the underprivileged kids learn how to play music or sing or whatever, what he's going to do is price his services at a rate where those people can afford it. And I would also recommend that what he does is he has a strategy for which deciding who actually gets to have those services, because you don't want the higher end market procuring Dan's services for cheaper just because they can get it cheaper. We need to go ahead to a break. I'll continue this conversation after the break. Thank you.